What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one I'm going to be going over the perfect auction draft on the ESPN platform. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this one. It's the generally most popular platform for fantasy football, and this will be the third video in the series. I've already done videos outlining what I view to be the perfect roster construction and an auction draft on both Yahoo and Sleeper. So this will be the one on ESPN where I go through all the pre-draft values of players on this platform. I've done different combinations of putting rosters together, and this is the roster that I ended up liking the most. Obviously, this is a mix between how I view players compared to ADP, along with how their pre-draft values correspond to where I would actually be willing to pay for them, and then seeing how to basically maximize the output of my roster throughout the course of the whole season. So it's a really fun exercise. I think this is really helpful. It's something that I would highly recommend you guys do going into your auction drafts, is build out a sort of idealized template. Understand that obviously not everything is going to go as planned. You'll have to, you know, have like this is how much I expected to pay for a player, and then a new tab on your sheet that tells you how much you actually paid. That way you know whether or not you guys can overpay for players later on, or whether or not you need to go bargain hunting just to sort of fill out your roster. But it's good to have a sort of like base case, base goal that you're going for, and then obviously you can build that around depending on what values present themselves and which ones don't. But it's a really fun exercise. I find it really helpful going into my auction drafts, and I hope you guys like it too. So yeah, really enjoyed doing this ESPN one. It's definitely the league that I do the majority of my auction drafts on as well. So it's a good exercise for myself as well. But yeah, with that, let's get into the start of the roster. So starting us off with the quarterback, this one might not be much of a surprise to you guys. I think Justin Herbert's the best buy here. He comes in at a $9 price tag. Obviously, I should have mentioned before, this is assuming a very standard roster construction of one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, one flex, along with a tight end, and then 7 bench spots. This is also assuming a 12-team PPR league as well, so the values will fluctuate a little bit depending upon your scoring format and your league size, but in general, the ideal roster construction, I think, pretty much holds. Most of these players have very similar values depending upon your league format and stuff. So I think it's a good base case for you guys to look at. So yeah, I think Justin Herbert's the best value here. He comes in at a $9 price tag, and I have him ranked just below the top tier of the three guys. I have him ranked as my quarterback 4 coming into the season. He's got an ADP of quarterback 7. He's also the 7th most expensive quarterback on ESPN right now. But on ESPN, the top tier guys cost you nearly $40, making them just a little bit too pricey for me. Getting to be able to pay basically 25% of the cost to get 95% of the production is something that I'm definitely willing to do at the quarterback position. And I find there's a pretty huge drop off for me after Herbert and Burrow. Burrow comes in at like a $22 price tag, so it doesn't make sense to draft Joe Burrow really here for me, given that I have Justin Herbert ranked higher. And then after those two, when we get into the tier 3 guys and below, I think there's a pretty significant drop off for the expected production that I'd expect to see out of these guys. So Justin Herbert's a guy that I'm pretty much penciling in on my roster, and if I can't get him at a reasonable price tag, then I'm pretty much just waiting on quarterback on ESPN. Starting us off with our running back 1, this one probably comes in at no surprise. I think Nick Chubb's the best buy here. He comes in at a $42 price tag. I've said many times this offseason that I think Nick Chubb's got a legitimate shot to finish as the running back 1 in fantasy. I've also mentioned earlier that I think he could potentially start slow to start the season. They've got a really brutal first 5 matchups along with a week 5 bye, so you might sort of have to just weather a bit of a rough start to your season. You might be like 3-3 at that point. Nick Chubb will probably be like a fringe top 10 guy, but his schedule really eases up. He's got a top 10 schedule in terms of fantasy points expected against the running back position over the second half. I totally expect Nick Chubb to be a league winner over the second half of the season. And he's also currently the 8th most expensive running back on ESPN per Fantasy Pros. His ADP comes in as the 5th most expensive, or as the 5th highest drafted running back. So there's a value there, and I have Nick Chubb ranked ahead of ADP. So Nick Chubb's a guy that I find just to be an insanely valuable piece of my roster. $42 is a very reasonable price tag to pay. That's 21% of your budget. Plenty of money saved having passed on that top tier of guys that go for around 70, and I think he can easily match their production here. So Nick Chubb's pretty much an auto buy for me, unless things get really out of hand in terms of how much he ends up going for during my drafts. Coming in at our running back 2, I think the best buy on ESPN right now is James Conner. He comes in at a price tag of $11, and I think James Conner can pretty much just volume his way to being a really safe high-end running back 2 this season. He's a super safe draft pick, assuming health, and actually I think he's got legitimate top 10 upside at the running back position from weeks 12 on last season. This is largely without Kyler Murray. He actually finishes at running back 6 over that span. He's just a way too involved part of this offense. They totally use him in the passing game a ton. There's no competition for touches behind him at all. I wouldn't expect there to be any real worry there. James Conner could easily be a running back that gets 80% of the running back touches in this offense, and he's clearly the guy they're going to give the ball to when they get towards the goal line as well. So $11 is just way too cheap for me right now. I think he's obviously a guy that can be a high-end running back too. He's super safe. He's going to give a lot of stability to your roster, and it gives you a lot of money to spend later on in the draft. It's really going to help build out your roster there. So then at wide receiver one, this one's pretty fun here. I think you should actually buy Tyreek Hill on ESPN. He comes in at a $60 price tag, which is obviously quite steep, but I think that Tyreek Hill's got a legitimate shot to finish as the wide receiver one this season. He's talked about wanting to have 2,000 receiving yards this year, and although that's probably unlikely, he certainly could do it. He gets a massive target share, over 30%. His average depth of target is insane. He's just way too involved in this offense. He's way too good of a player to be held down, and I understand that it is pricey, but we've saved so much money by going relatively cheap at quarterback and going cheap at the running back too that you just have to spend that money. I highly recommend that you do spend the majority of your money, about, I don't know, 85, 90% of it on your starting roster or on your starting lineup, if not more. I generally recommend about $2 per bench player. So I think spending about 85%, even to 90% of your budget on the starting lineup is the most optimal way to build things. And that means we have a lot of money left over to spend up. So even though Tyreek Hill might not necessarily be an insane value, he's significantly cheaper than the top two wide receivers in Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And I think he can easily match that production. So he's going to give you a really high-end wide receiver one here. And we save the money at the running back two position so we can actually afford to do this here. So it makes a lot of sense to draft Tyreek Hill, and it just makes the roster really fun here. Coming in as our wide receiver two, this one should be no surprise to you guys. I think Chris Olave is the buy here. He's got a price tag of $26 on ESPN right now, and I'm just buying Chris Olave absolutely everywhere. He's going to be a top 10 this season by my projections. He comes in as the 12th most expensive wide receiver here, so it's actually a little bit more expensive than you would see based off his ADP. His ADP is going right around that wide receiver 13, wide receiver 14 area, but I think he's totally worth the price tag here, and if you're pairing Tyreek Hill with Chris Olave, you're probably a lock to have the best starting duo of wide receivers in your league. That's effectively what you would have if you had like a mid-first round pick and then had to reach a little bit on Olave because you don't normally see him making it to the third round. So you're getting a first and second round pick basically spent on wide receiver, and on top of this, you've already gotten a guy that also normally goes in the second round in Nick Chubb. So really quality start here. You've got really elite running back play because of Nick Chubb and the safety of James Conner, and now you've got a really elite duo at the wide receiver position, and I think Chris Olave honestly has a shot to finish the top 5 wide receiver this season, and if that happened, you'd just be absolutely dominant at the position this season. Next up, believe it or not, we actually still have quite a bit of money left here, so I think Mark Andrews is the buy here, coming in at a price tag of $21. I really love the value on Mark Andrews this season. I think he's got a legitimate shot to at least be close to Kelsey in terms of production this season. I would obviously expect Travis Kelsey to finish as the tight end one overall this season, but Mark Andrews I think has a shot to be not far behind him, and he comes in at less than a third of the cost on ESPN right now. Travis Kelsey goes for about $65, and Mark Andrews is less than a third of that, so it just makes way too much sense for me to buy Mark Andrews here. If I don't buy Mark Andrews, I find myself either going for Goddard or just waiting to spend $1 on the tight end position. But like I said earlier, I really want to prioritize spending on our starting lineup here, and we've got the money left because we saved money at our running back too. We're obviously going to cheap out on our bench as well, and we're going to have a really quite high-end quality starting roster here. We're going to have a really high-end quarterback now. We've got 2 running backs I'm really high on, both guys that are inside my top 15. Now we've got 2 more wide receivers inside my top 10, and we're getting my number 2 tight end, I'm a number 2 tight end here. So really just makes a lot of sense here. It gives us an absolutely dominant starting lineup in this league, and obviously we're still going to have enough money left to make a decent flex and bench here. So coming in as our flex spot, I think Mike Williams makes the most sense here. He's got a price tag of $12. Mike Williams is just the perfect option for your flex because of how high his weekly ceiling is. Obviously, there will be a lot of weeks where he might disappear, but because of how elite your starting wide receivers are outside of him, I think you can sort of weather that, along with how consistent Nick Chubb and James Conner are going to be. So I think that Mike Williams is going to be kind of can really take you over the top. On top of that, it's just really nice to be able to pair him with Justin Herbert. It's really fun to have stacks on your roster. There's a lot of research that goes into stacks as well that show that it actually does increase your odds of winning overall on a weekly basis, just because it gives you a ceiling that teams that don't have stacks on their roster don't really have. There will be a couple weeks this season where Justin Herbert will throw 2 passing touchdowns to Mike Williams, and in those weeks there's just not really any chance that your opponent can beat you. And having that sort of just auto win card in your lineup is a really nice thing to have. And obviously we're going to have enough money left to fill out our flex spots from the bench if we need to, if something were to happen to Mike Williams. So I don't mind spending $12 on Mike Williams here. It's about how much I would recommend paying for him, but I think he's the perfect guy to throw into our flex here with this roster construction. Then moving on to our bench, you guys probably could have guessed it. Our RB3 coming off the bench is going to be David Montgomery. He's got a price tag of only $5 on ESPN right now, which is just absolutely insane. I've got him ranked as my RB16 right now. I think he's going to be a top 20 guy. I think he's got a legitimate shot to finish ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs even. And if something were to happen to Jahmyr Gibbs, then Montgomery could easily be a top 5 guy even. And so $5 is just way too easy of a price tag for him here. It would allow you to play matchups a little bit. You could even play him in your flex if you wanted to. You can play him as your running back 2 in weeks where James Conner doesn't have very great matchups. So he's just going to be a really nice guy to have on your roster, a guy that you can feel comfortable playing any given week, and he's going to be a really high-end producer throughout the course of the season. So I love drafting Montgomery here. Samaje Perine is another guy I grabbed quite a bit. He's got only $2 price tag right now. That's really solid. He's going to be really involved, especially over the first half of the season while Javonte Williams still gets healthy. I know Javonte Williams is listed to be fully cleared for contact, and he's even going to play in the preseason, so that's really exciting. But I think that P. Ryan and Javonte are both going to be plenty involved in this offense. We often see that Sean Payton offenses really focus on using running backs, especially in the passing game. Samaje Perine actually profiles as the better pass catcher between he and Javonte Williams, so I think he's going to be super involved, and especially in PPR formats, he's going to be a really nice running back to bring off the bench. And then our last running back off the bench here is going to be Antonio Gibson. He's only going for $1, which is actually free, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to finish in the top 30 this season. He's going to finally be getting that pass catching role. I think he's a better runner than Brian Robinson as well, so we could see him get more touches in that regard as well. But just being that involved to a pass catcher for Washington is going to be really nice for him. J.D. McKissick's consistently ranked in the top 10 in terms of targets at the running back position. That's all going to go to Antonio Gibson this season, and honestly, Antonio Gibson's a better player, so there's a lot of upside there, and I really like the value of Gibson at $1. Next up, I wanted to add a couple wide receivers, so I generally try and be pretty balanced on my bench. I go with three running backs and 4 wide receivers here, but generally just trying to balance out the number we have with a slight edge towards the wide receiver position because we have PPR format here. So our first wide receiver off the bench is going to be Christian Kirk. He comes in at a $5 price tag. He's going to be a guy that I'm going to feel really comfortable about playing in my flex in a given week. He's going to be super safe. He actually was a wide receiver 1 last season, finishing, I believe, as the wide receiver 9 in fantasy and PPR formats. And honestly, I think he can put up very similar numbers this season. I do expect Calvin Ridley to be the number 1 in that offense, but I think Trevor Lawrence is going to take a huge step forward this season. There should just be more to go around for this Jaguars offense, and Christian Kirk could certainly be a very reliable option. And at $5, it just makes a lot of sense. He's going to help stabilize the position, especially if something were to happen to Mike Williams. Jordan Addison's a guy I love targeting here. He's a very talented rookie coming in to basically replace Adam Thielen for Minnesota. He's going to run a ton of routes. He's a really talented player. I think there's a real world where over the second half of the season he could be a staple in your starting lineup. And again, at $2, it just makes too much sense. Gabe Davis is a guy I buy quite a bit at $1. Obviously, I know he's a really boom or bust profile player, but he's a nice guy to play in your flex. You could certainly play matchups between him and Mike Williams if you wanted to. Gabe Davis will have a few weeks this season where he's going to absolutely go off. It's also possible that he just maybe is healthier this season. Josh Allen's healthier, and he and Allen have a better connection. Things could go break right for Gabe Davis, and at $1, I'm willing to take that risk. And then Quentin Johnston's a guy I buy quite a bit for $1. Having already drafted Mike Williams, it's a nice insurance policy because if Mike Williams were to go down, which doesn't exactly happen very infrequently, it could certainly happen again this season, and if that happened, Johnston would be a guy that you could play any given week, and again, it'd be another stack that you could play with Justin Herbert, so $1 makes a lot of sense there, and I think it's a really good value. So to look over the whole final roster here, we're going to come in with the quarterback of Justin Herbert. Our 2 starting running backs are going to be Nick Chubb and James Conner. Our 2 starting wide receivers are going to be Tyreek Hill and Chris Olave. Our starting tight end will be Mark Andrews. Our starting flex will be Mike Williams. We'll have any kicker or defense because, again, you do not want to spend an extra dollar on either one of those positions. Just don't do it. It's a waste of $1. You're going to be cycling through those guys throughout the course of the season anyway. Don't spend the extra dollar on it. Off your bench, we're going to have Antonio Gibson, David Montgomery, and Samaje Perine rounding out our running back room. And we will have Jordan Addison, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Quentin Johnston rounding out the wide receiver room. This comes out to exactly $200, so obviously things do need to go perfectly for you to be able to afford this entire roster. There will be some guys that go for more expensive, maybe some guys that go for less, so I think it's a good baseline to be looking at here. In general, I find that the bench guys are the guys get out of hand because anybody that has extra money isn't going to let a guy like Antonio Gibson go for $1 because if they have $10 left, they'll just be willing to spend that. But that's why I focus most of my energy on getting the starting lineup filled because that's what you can control. It tends to be what's more predictable in drafts. And look at the starting lineup. We've got, in my mind, a top 4 quarterback. We've got 2, in my mind, top 15 running backs. We've got 2 top 10 wide receivers, the 2nd overall tight end, a wide receiver that I've got inside my top 24 that's going to have week-winning performances, and then we've got plenty of bench options that I'm really excited about. So this team would be absolutely just insane. I'd love leaving my draft with this, especially in a 12-team league. I'd feel like I absolutely dominated my draft, and if I could make this team happen, I'd really feel comfortable with my odds of winning my league going into the season. So, yeah, I really like this team. I think that this one turned out really well, especially compared to the other leagues. It's really fun to see how the rosters varied, but also were similar from platform to platform. But in general, I think that all of them turned out really well, but ESPN might have actually turned out the best. So that'll do it for my perfect roster and auction draft series. This was the 3rd video. Obviously, if you haven't watched the ones on Sleeper or Yahoo yet, I do highly recommend you go do those. Even if you don't draft on those platforms, it'll be really helpful just to see which players I recommend targeting on different platforms, understand where the values are, and maybe just be cognizant of what those differences are from platform to platform. Up next, I'll be doing a safest series as well, safest players to draft. I'll starting out with the quarterbacks, then I'll do running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Then I'll do riskiest players to draft as well, and I'll probably do you some must-draft players and must-avoid players as well, along with getting into some draft strategy stuff. I'll tell you guys what some optimal draft strategies are in snake drafts as well. So really coming up on draft season. It's early August right now. We've got like 5 weeks before the start of the NFL season. It's super exciting. It's been really exciting to see the channel grow. We're at like 550 subscribers, which is super cool. If this is your first time on the channel, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. I would love it if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, get more content like this. I'm putting out a video every single day. Really want to be here to help you win your leagues this season, help you dominate your drafts, and I'll be putting out videos throughout the course of the regular season as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. If you liked the video, which I hope you did because you made it this far, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, really helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and helps me know that you guys want to see more content like this. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.